And fans of the show, look, we're putting a show together for you guys. We're just fans of college football, okay? And we're just freak fans that follow football all year long, and that's really what we want you to do is just come along with us. Hit us up in the comment section, like the video, please, and subscribe.
Mhm.
But speaking of Nick Saban, what did you think about? Uh, what did you think about his? This is probably one of the ones I watch lesser of because he just bores the ever living crap out of me. So
Yeah, yeah. I thought this year he seemed more relaxed, and I thought last year he seemed more
it's
relaxed, and the year
because he went to
prior to that.
Italy. He went to Italy,
That's what
bro.
that was kind of my talking point. It's like, hey, maybe it's because he went to Italy, but
That's it.
I also think that he has, in a good way, relaxed a little bit on his staff and on his players, right? And it, it can be taken as a negative, but I think that it could be healthy as well. In creating the culture, well, not creating, but refining the culture that they have in Alabama. But one thing that I got from this, it was interesting to hear Nick Saban talk about humility, right, and how he has articulated the importance of humility to his players and to his staff. Then, ironically, one of the players he brought with him, J.C. Latham, outstanding defensive lineman. He's a preseason All American, and he was a 5-star coming out of high school, out of IMG Academy. This guy is an absolute stud. Um, but after Nick Saban spoke about humility and how the players that he brought with him understand the importance of humility, J.C. Latham went out and said that the Tide are going to win it all, a national championship, undefeated, the Joe Moore, and I want that Outland.
Oh boy.
And I just thought, not trying to pick on the kid, really not. Um, I just thought it was too funny not to share, and too ironic, that probably an hour after Nick Saban says that, he's on the stand talking about all of these things that him and his team are going to do, and maybe not really um, taking that humility pill very well.
Yeah. Look, it's been pretty well known that Bryce Young is gone. Okay, from this team, Will Anderson is gone. Uh, Two guys that were generational talents and showed up at media days those last couple years and rocked it out and embraced challenges and showed humility. Um, but calling your shot is not something that I would necessarily do. Um, but um, you know, Alabama is one of they're in the top 10 for teams that could win a national championship this year. So, um, and the kid's betting on himself. So, hey, you go get it. But you talk that talk, you got to walk that walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, Bama, to me, I don't. I'm not going to say they're not a favorite to win, in my opinion, the national championship, which is obviously what their expectations are, according to J.C. Latham, um, and that is kind of the standard that Nick Saban has set. But they're not my pick to win it, and they're not even really that high on my list to win it, just based on them playing in the SEC, having to go against LSU, having to go against UGA. So I mean, but they are good enough to do it, right? Let's not. It's not poor old Alabama, right? Let's. They still have the most talented roster in college football, so they could definitely win the national championship. But if they don't, and that's your expectation, then what happens if you don't do that? Then it's an unsuccessful season,
Yeah,
and I don't think it should be that way. That's not really what college football is.
yeah. Well, uh, Look, and I'll say this: Nick Saban's the best coach to ever do it. Okay, everybody else is you know everybody else that's on that list is kind of close together. Nick Saban is the best coach there ever was. Um, and but you can only come out and say after a year where you didn't win the national championship that it was a rebuilding year. You can't say it multiple times. Okay, and that's not the standard at Alabama. And this year, um, I mean, wouldn't you class? I would classify this as a rebuilding year. Whereas I do think it is going to be a good defense. Um, you don't have a returning quarterback. It was one of the worst receiver cores as far as drop balls last year. Um, you Alabama fans will say they lost a couple games by a point or two. Well, you won a couple games by a point or two also. So I'm not super high on this team winning a national championship this year, but if it's going to happen, it's going to have to be a different style than we're used to seeing from Alabama, and um, changing your style from a finesse team to a more physical approach and running the ball. I don't think that that's something you can just snap your fingers and hey, uh, we're going back to bully ball. Well, there's teams that maybe you can't bully quite like you used to. And if you think you're going to win a championship by running the football alone, those days are gone, buddy. It's not happening.
Hmm.
Nobody's ran the football on Georgia successfully to win a game in 5 years. It's about to win a big game, you got to have a quarterback that's going to make clutch plays, and you've got to have wide receivers that catch the ball after they get open, and you've got to be able to do multiple things. And this team doesn't seem multiple to me.
Right. And I do see that as a struggle. For Alabama, this is a um, this is not the dynamic team that we've seen. This is not the finesse team that we've seen Alabama win with in recent history. This is seemingly this is going to be a reversion back to maybe like '08, '09, 2010 type Alabama. And this is just a different league at this point. And you know, like you said, you're not going to run on Georgia and expect to win the game when they're able to, like, let's say, hypothetically, you're able to stop Georgia's rushing attack. They can still go over the top on you, and they have a good enough receiving core to do that. And I'm not saying that Bama does not have the receiving core to do that. I'm just saying that between that and the quarterback, um, I think that they're unproven. They are, again, the most talented team in the country, and nobody's denying that. But they are unproven in that, and I haven't seen the dynamic playmakers that Nick Saban is used to having, and so I think it's fair to doubt them a little bit this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and i- if your approach is going to be going and running the football, you better have an outstanding offensive line and outstanding running backs. And look, I mean, uh, Justice Haynes is coming into Alabama, and I've heard good things. And this was a guy that I thought the Georgia Bulldogs were going to get. Um, and he was a 5 star. And freshmen, I've said before, I do feel like freshmen can step in and play running back. But it's him and McClellan, and then just kind of like a platoon of backs. So it seems like it's going to be running back by association. I mean, there's no Derrick Henry here. Okay. And the wide receiver core has gotten a little bit better, I would say, just by, default, by adding, guys that came in through recruiting and things like that. But you're still relying on Jermaine Burton. Okay. And Jermaine has got to step up for what I think is going to be a pretty daggum good defense. I do think the Alabama secondary is going to be awesome this year. Georgia's secondary is going to be awesome this year. Those are, I think, probably the two best secondaries in the SEC. Um, but boy, are the offenses looking different. And who would have thought we'd have said a few years ago that Georgia's got a loaded wide receiver room and Alabama wide receivers have got to step up. I mean, you just can't predict this stuff. You know, and another thing, who's going to get those guys the ball, man? the, the old saying used to be, if you've got, and I don't agree with this at all, but the old saying used to be, if you got two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, right? Well, what if you have three? I don't think that if you have two, you don't have any quarterback. I think that's not true. But if you have three quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. You went and got a guy from Notre Dame who completed around 50% of his passes last year.
Mhm.
And uh, Nick Saban felt like this was necessary. I mean, all these awesome recruiting classes, and you don't have a quarterback ready to go. Um, things just aren't as sturdy as what they seemed a few years ago. Um, like I said, nobody will ever take it away from Nick Saban. He's the best there ever was. Alabama is the best dynasty so far that there's ever been. But going and winning a national championship this year, or having guys winning this award, that award, it's way too early for all that. And um, there we got to see some stepping up from the Alabama uh, personnel and players. And uh, if they're going to install a mindset of we're going to run you over this year, well then they're already behind, because that should have been happening last year, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And